People are feeling really squeezed. Squeezed when they try to buy their groceries, can't find a place to call home. And healthcare more and more is causing you to pay out of pocket, or it's just simply you have to wait forever to get it. And the biggest threat to our vision for a better future are conservative cuts. I don't want a Liberal government. I don't want Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister. And so folks out there, if you've been watching the Liberals focus on themselves instead of your challenges, your problems, and you're losing hope, don't give up. Don't give up hope.
Does that mean that you will not work with the Bloc and Conservatives to bring down the government?
People need. I'm not going to let them cut the things that people need. So no, I'm not going to play their games. We know people are hurting right now. People are struggling right now. They're having a hard time affording their groceries. They're having a hard time affording a place to call home.
Okay, so ready for a deep dive into Canadian politics.
As always.
But, we're not looking at your typical news article or poll today.
Oh, what do we have?
Our source today, it's a text file.
A text file.
Yeah, titled, so let me get this straight, things.txt.
Interesting.
It's raw, very opinionated.
Sounds promising.
It gives us a peek into, how some Canadians are feeling about Justin Trudeau and the NDP.
I see. So we're getting into the emotional landscape surrounding these political players, not just like dry policy points, but the actual feelings.
Exactly. And, the author of this file, they don't hold back.
Oh, really?
They paint a pretty bleak picture. Canadians struggling under Trudeau, self-centered policies, talking about benefits being stripped away.
I see.
They even mention the rising cost of living, how much everything costs.
Yeah.
And how it feels like the government isn't doing enough to help.
This definitely reflects the sentiment that we're seeing more and more these days. Like, even if the economic indicators, the official numbers, might be saying one thing, what we're hearing from a lot of Canadians is, it's a different story.
Yeah.
Their actual lived experiences, especially for people dealing with things like, crazy high inflation and wages that aren't keeping up, it's creating this real sense of discontent.
And it's interesting because I noticed this tension in the text file. There's this real frustration with the Liberals, but also this wariness of the Conservatives.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people feel kind of caught in that dilemma.
Absolutely.
And this is where I think your thoughts on the NDP get really interesting.
Right. Because even though the author of the file is pretty critical of Trudeau and the Liberals, what seems to really scare them is the idea of a Conservative majority.
Uh-huh.
Because if the Conservatives had a majority, they wouldn't need the NDP's support to pass anything, to get laws made. And that idea, that really worries the author. And I think it speaks to the strategic calculations voters often have to make, especially in a parliamentary system like Canada's.
Yeah, it's because right now, Trudeau's Liberals need the NDP to get anything done, to pass laws.
Exactly.
Which forces them to work together.
Right.
But, you're arguing something pretty bold here.
What's that?
You're saying that the NDP is more interested in just holding on to power than actually, representing what the people want. That's a pretty serious accusation.
Well, think of it this way. The NDP, by sort of teaming up with the Liberals, they gain some influence, right?
Yeah.
They can kind of push for certain policies, maybe get some concessions from the Liberals on things like social programs.
Okay.
Which you could say is a win, for the people who support the NDP.
Yeah.
But the flip side of that is, they might have to kind of soften their stance on other issues.
Oh, I see.
Like maybe environmental policies to keep that alliance with the Liberals going.
So it's they're getting some wins, maybe on things like social programs.
Yeah.
But the cost could be not really pushing as hard on some other issues they care about.
Yeah, because they don't want to risk losing that power, losing that influence, and maybe, letting the Conservatives take over.
And that seems to be the real fear driving a lot of this.
Exactly. And that's the tough thing with these kinds of alliances in politics.
Right.
Do you stick to every single one of your beliefs, 100%?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you make compromises, knowing you might achieve some of your goals, but maybe not all of them?
It's a tough choice.
It really is. A constant balancing act.
And then there's there's the housing benefit program that the author specifically calls out.
Right.
You're saying it's really not that effective, even though, the idea behind it was good.
And this kind of gets to a bigger problem.
What's that?
The gap between what politicians promise and what actually happens.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's easy to announce a program, make it sound good. It's another thing entirely to make sure that program actually helps the people it's supposed to help.
Right.
There's so much bureaucracy, you know, paperwork and rules.
Yeah.
Often not enough funding.
And then there's eligibility.
Yeah, who can even get the benefit?
Like sometimes the rules end up excluding the people who need the help the most.
Exactly.
Remember when they announced that program, it sounded great, you know?
Right.
But I have a friend who's been trying to actually get that benefit for months now.
Really?
And it's been nothing but a nightmare, just red tape everywhere.
Wow.
Makes you wonder, are these programs really designed to help, or are they just,
It's a question a lot of people are asking.
Yeah.
And that disconnect between what the government says it's going to do and the reality that people are living with.
Yeah.
That's what's fueling a lot of the anger and frustration that you see in this text file.
And you can really feel that frustration in the language the author uses.
Yeah.
They use some strong words, like,
Yeah.
remember they called the government a parasite at one point.
Yeah.
It's not just disagreement. It's like deeper than that.
It really is.
What were you feeling when you wrote that?
I think it comes from a sense of, well, betrayal. It's this feeling that the people in power, they're out of touch, maybe even taking advantage of us.
Mm-hmm.
Words like parasite, they're meant to evoke that feeling, you know, that gut reaction.
Yeah.
It's about highlighting how powerless people feel compared to the government.
So it's not just about disagreeing with this or that policy.
Right.
It's about something much deeper.
Exactly.
It's about not trusting the system, feeling like your voice doesn't matter, like it's all rigged against the average person.
And this brings up a huge question.
What's that?
How do we bridge that gap?
Between the government and the people.
Yes. How do we hold our elected officials accountable? And I don't just mean during elections. I mean, like, how do we make sure they're listening to us all the time?
Yeah.
And then how do we make sure that the programs and stuff, you know, the stuff that's supposed to help us,
Right.
how do we make sure it actually does what it's supposed to?
Yeah.
And that it doesn't just become another obstacle?
It's a tough question.
It is. But it's a question we all need to be thinking about.
Absolutely. Well, we've seen how Canadian politics, even just through one person's eyes, can feel like this big tangled web
Right.
full of alliances and compromises and frustration.
It's messy,
Yeah,
but it matters.
it really does. And I think, understanding how complex it is, being able to look at it critically,
Yeah.
those are the first steps towards making things better.
Demanding better.
Exactly. Towards making sure that our voices, what we need, it's not just heard,
Yeah.
it's acted on.
Well said. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. It's given us, all of us, a lot to think about.
My pleasure. And thanks to all of you for listening. Keep those questions coming, keep thinking critically, and we'll catch you on our next deep dive.